Right now, millions of people are sitting down to breakfast and unknowingly making decisions that are either protecting their body from disease or slowly feeding it to cancer, heart failure, and blindness. And I'm not being dramatic. The 4 foods I'm going to talk about today, oatmeal, eggs, bacon, and dairy, are consumed by billions of people every single morning. But here's what nobody tells you. The way most people prepare and choose these foods is completely wrong. And the science behind what actually happens when these foods enter your body is so powerful, so specific, and in some cases so alarming that once you understand it, you will never look at your breakfast plate the same way again. I've spent decades as a physician and researcher studying how food activates the body's 5 health defense systems: angiogenesis, stem cell regeneration, the gut microbiome, DNA protection, and the immune system. I've lectured at Harvard, Dartmouth, and Tufts. I've developed more than 40 medical treatments. And what I've discovered through years of clinical research is this: your breakfast is not just a meal. It is the single most powerful medical intervention you make every day. And most people are getting it catastrophically wrong. But here's the remarkable part. Once you understand the science I'm about to share with you, fixing your breakfast takes almost no effort, costs almost nothing, and the health benefits are extraordinary. Let me start with something that will surprise you. The healthiest thing you can do before breakfast is nothing. I know that sounds counterintuitive. We've been told our entire lives that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, that you need to eat first thing in the morning, that skipping meals is dangerous. But here's what the research actually shows. When you finish dinner in the evening and don't eat again until morning, your body enters a remarkable metabolic state. After roughly 12 hours without food, your metabolism shifts from burning the sugars and carbohydrates you've consumed to burning stored body fat. Think of your metabolism like a car with 2 fuel tanks. Tank 1 is sugar, tank 2 is fat. Your body always burns sugar first because it's the easiest fuel to access. But when you haven't eaten for 12 hours, tank 1 runs empty, and your body has no choice but to switch to tank 2, your stored fat. This isn't some extreme fasting protocol. It's simply what happens when you stop eating at 7 p.m. and don't eat again until 7 a.m. 12 hours. That's it. Your body becomes what I call a fat-burning Ferrari. And the longer you extend that window, even by just 1 or 2 hours, the more fat your body mobilizes. Your stem cells become more active. Your cellular repair processes accelerate. So before you even think about what to eat for breakfast, understand that when you eat matters enormously. Now let me talk about the food that most people believe is the healthiest breakfast choice on earth. Oatmeal. And I need to be very careful here because what I'm about to tell you will shock a lot of people. Not all oatmeal is created equal. In fact, one common type of oatmeal is essentially the nutritional equivalent of eating a candy bar. Let me explain. There are 3 types of oats that most people encounter: steel-cut oats, rolled oats, and instant oats. Steel-cut oats are the whole oat grain, chopped into pieces. They look like tiny rice grains. They take about 20 to 30 minutes to cook. Rolled oats have been steamed and flattened. They cook in about 5 minutes. And instant oats have been pre-cooked, dried, and often loaded with added sugar and artificial flavors. Here's the critical difference. Steel-cut oats retain almost all of their original bioactive compounds. Rolled oats retain most of them. But instant oats, the kind that comes in those convenient little packets with flavors like maple brown sugar or apple cinnamon, have been so heavily processed that they've lost most of their nutritional value and have had sugar pumped back in. They are, by every clinical definition, an ultra-processed food, and ultra-processed foods are linked to increased rates of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and premature death. So if you've been eating instant oatmeal every morning thinking you're making a healthy choice, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you've been deceived. But here's what makes real oatmeal genuinely extraordinary, and this is something that almost nobody knows about. Oats contain a molecule called avenanthramide. It is found nowhere else in nature, not in wheat, not in rice, not in any other grain on earth, only in oats. And the research on avenanthramide is nothing short of remarkable. Studies conducted by the Angiogenesis Foundation using an advanced wound healing model found that avenanthramide, when applied to wounds, doubled the speed of healing. Let me say that again. It doubled the rate at which wounds closed. But that's not even the most extraordinary part. The healed tissue didn't form the thick, raised scars you'd normally expect. Instead, the tissue architecture resembled normal, unwounded skin. The collagen fibers were shorter, more randomly aligned, almost identical to skin that had never been damaged. This is regeneration, not just repair, and it's coming from a compound in your morning oatmeal. On top of that, oats contain beta-glucan, a soluble fiber that's been shown to lower LDL cholesterol, reduce blood sugar spikes, and feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Beta-glucan is so powerful that the FDA has actually approved a health claim specifically linking oat beta-glucan to reduced risk of heart disease. That's an extraordinarily rare endorsement. But here's the key. You only get these benefits from steel-cut or rolled oats. And here's my favorite preparation method. Take your steel-cut oats, put them in a jar with water or milk, and let them soak overnight in the refrigerator. By morning, they're soft, creamy, and ready to eat without any cooking at all. No heat means no destruction of those precious bioactive compounds. Add some fresh berries, which contain their own powerful disease-fighting polyphenols, and you have what I consider one of the most medically powerful breakfasts on the planet. Now, let me move to a food that has been unfairly vilified for over 50 years, eggs. I grew up being told that eggs were dangerous, that they raised your cholesterol, that eating more than 1 or 2 per week was a risk factor for heart disease. And for decades, millions of people avoided eggs or threw away the yolk, eating only the whites. But here's what nobody told you. The entire case against eggs was built on fundamentally flawed science from the 1970s. And when I say flawed, I mean spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. Here's what happened. In the 1970s, researchers conducted studies looking at the typical American breakfast, which at the time included eggs, bacon, sausage, buttered toast, and hash browns cooked in lard. They found that people who ate this breakfast regularly had higher cholesterol and more heart disease. And they blamed the eggs. But they didn't isolate the eggs from everything else on the plate. They didn't account for the bacon. They didn't account for the sausage. They didn't account for the butter and the lard. They simply looked at the whole greasy breakfast, saw the bad outcomes, and pointed at the eggs. It was like blaming the passenger for a car crash caused by a drunk driver. The eggs were innocent. The processed meats and saturated fats sitting next to them were the real culprits. Modern science has completely exonerated eggs. A landmark study at the University of Massachusetts enrolled 33 men and women over the age of 60 in a randomized crossover trial. For 5 weeks, participants consumed 1 egg per day. The results were stunning. Serum lutein levels increased by 26%. Serum zeaxanthin levels increased by 38%. And here's the critical part. Total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, and triglycerides were completely unaffected. 0 change. 1 egg per day for 5 weeks, and not a single negative impact on blood lipids. But the benefits were extraordinary. Lutein and zeaxanthin are carotenoids that accumulate in the macula of your eye, the part of the retina responsible for central vision. They form a protective pigment that shields your photoreceptors from the damaging blue light that causes age-related macular degeneration. Macular degeneration is the leading cause of vision loss in people over 60. And a study by Tufts University found something remarkable. When people consumed the same amount of lutein from eggs versus spinach or supplements, the bioavailability from eggs was 3 times higher. Your body absorbs lutein from eggs 3 times more efficiently than from any other source. The fat in the egg yolk acts as a natural delivery vehicle, carrying these carotenoids directly into your bloodstream. A population-based study following over 3,600 adults for 15 years found that people who consumed 2 to 4 eggs per week had a 49% reduced risk of developing late-stage macular degeneration compared to those who ate 1 egg or fewer per week. Think about that. A 49% reduction in the risk of going blind from eating eggs. I had a patient, Eleanor, 72 years old. She came to me worried about her deteriorating vision. Her ophthalmologist had diagnosed early macular degeneration. She had been avoiding eggs for 30 years because her old doctor told her they were bad for her heart. I explained the science to her, encouraged her to eat 1 pasture-raised egg every morning. Pasture-raised is important because those eggs contain significantly more omega-3 fatty acids and even higher levels of lutein and zeaxanthin. 6 months later, her eye doctor noted that the progression of her macular degeneration had stabilized. Her blood work showed dramatically improved carotenoid levels, and her cholesterol was exactly where it had been before. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "All those years I was afraid of eggs, and they were the one thing that could have protected my eyes." She was right, and her story is not unique. Now I need to talk about something far more serious. Bacon. And I want to be completely transparent with you here because I know this is going to be difficult for many people to hear. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer reviewed over 800 studies on processed meat and cancer, and they classified processed meat, including bacon, ham, sausages, and hot dogs, as a Group 1 carcinogen. Group 1, that is the same category as tobacco smoking, the same category as asbestos, the same category as plutonium. Now, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that eating bacon is as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. What it means is that the evidence linking processed meat to cancer is just as strong, just as conclusive, just as scientifically certain as the evidence linking tobacco to cancer. The mechanism is different, the dose is different, but the certainty of the link is the same. A massive study tracking nearly 500,000 people published in the International Journal of Epidemiology found that for every 25 grams of processed meat consumed daily, which is roughly one single slice of bacon, the risk of colorectal cancer increased by 18 to 20%. One slice every day. That's all it takes. And the reason is terrifying when you understand the biology. When you fry bacon, you create compounds called heterocyclic amines. These are chemicals that form when meat is cooked at high temperatures. Heterocyclic amines are direct DNA mutagens. They don't just damage cells, they alter the genetic code of your cells in ways that can trigger cancerous growth. On top of that, processed meats contain nitrites and nitrates, preservatives that react with the amino acids in meat to form N-nitroso compounds in your digestive tract. These N-nitroso compounds are among the most potent carcinogens ever studied. Research has shown that hot dogs contain 10 times more of these compounds than fresh red meat. And then there's the heme iron in red meat, which catalyzes the formation of even more carcinogenic compounds in your colon. It's a triple attack on your DNA. But here's what I tell my patients. I'm a realist. I know that some of you love bacon and are not going to give it up entirely. So if you do eat bacon, there are ways to reduce the damage. First, cook it lighter. The darker and more charred the bacon, the more heterocyclic amines it contains. A lighter color means fewer carcinogens. Second, cook it in extra virgin olive oil instead of its own fat. Olive oil contains polyphenols that have been shown to neutralize some of the harmful compounds that form during high temperature cooking. Third, never eat bacon every day. Treat it as an occasional indulgence, not a daily staple. And fourth, eat it alongside vegetables that are rich in antioxidants, dark leafy greens, tomatoes, broccoli, which can help counteract some of the oxidative damage. I knew a man, Thomas, 58 years old, retired firefighter. He ate bacon and eggs every single morning for over 25 years. When he came to me, he had been diagnosed with early-stage colon cancer. After his treatment, he asked me what he should change. I told him the truth about bacon. He didn't want to hear it, but he made the switch, kept the eggs, replaced the daily bacon with smoked salmon twice a week, and turkey bacon occasionally. 3 years later, cancer-free, no recurrence. He told me the hardest part wasn't giving up bacon. The hardest part was accepting that something he loved was hurting him. Now let's talk about the most complex and misunderstood food category on the breakfast table, dairy. And I say complex because dairy isn't one thing, it's many things. Milk, cheese, yogurt, butter, cream. And the science shows that each of these affects your body in dramatically different ways. Let's start with milk. A study of 2,245 participants found that people who regularly consumed milk had a 39% lower risk of developing hypertension compared to those who didn't drink milk. 39%. That's enormous. Milk provides calcium for bones, vitamin D for immune function, and high-quality protein for muscle maintenance. For people over 50, especially women approaching or past menopause, milk can be a genuinely protective food. Cheese is even more interesting. Cheese is a fermented food, which means it contains probiotics, live bacteria that support your gut microbiome. A large-scale analysis found that consuming up to 200 grams of cheese per day showed no increased risk of heart disease. None. Despite its saturated fat content, the fermentation process appears to change the way those fats interact with your cardiovascular system. The calcium in cheese may actually bind to fatty acids in your digestive tract, preventing them from being absorbed. But here's where dairy gets fascinating and where most people are making a critical mistake. Yogurt. If you've been buying low-fat yogurt because you think it's the healthier option, I need you to listen very carefully. A massive meta-analysis of over 235,000 people found that regular yogurt consumption was associated with a 13% reduction in cardiovascular mortality, 13% lower risk of dying from heart disease from eating yogurt. But here's the twist. The benefit came from whole-fat yogurt, not low-fat, and the reason goes back to one of the most alarming food science discoveries of the past decade. When manufacturers remove fat from yogurt, it tastes terrible, so they add emulsifiers, thickeners, and stabilizers to restore the texture and mouthfeel. Two of the most common additives are carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80. And in 2021, a groundbreaking study conducted jointly by researchers at the University of Paris and Georgia State University examined the impact of 20 different commonly used dietary emulsifiers on the human gut microbiome. What they found sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Both carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80 induced lasting detrimental changes to the gut microbiota. They increased pro-inflammatory bacteria. They decreased protective bacteria like Akkermansia, which is essential for maintaining the gut lining. They elevated levels of bacterial toxins that trigger chronic inflammation. Essentially, these additives were tearing apart the very ecosystem that protects your intestinal wall from disease. And chronic gut inflammation is now linked to everything from irritable bowel syndrome to colon cancer to depression and anxiety. So when you buy low-fat yogurt thinking you're making the healthy choice, you're actually consuming a product that has had its beneficial fats removed and replaced with chemicals that damage your gut. The full-fat version, the plain, unsweetened Greek yogurt with no additives, that's the one that provides the 13% cardiovascular mortality reduction. That's the one with the live probiotic cultures that feed and protect your microbiome. Always check the ingredient label. If you see carboxymethylcellulose, polysorbate 80, modified food starch, or any emulsifier you can't pronounce, put it back on the shelf. Now, before I finish, I need to share one more discovery that will change your morning routine. If you add milk or cream to your coffee, you need to hear this. Coffee contains a powerful bioactive compound called chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is one of the most potent natural antioxidants ever studied. It protects your DNA, reduces inflammation, and has been linked to lower rates of type 2 diabetes, liver disease, and certain cancers. But when you add dairy to your coffee, the fat in the milk or cream forms tiny molecular structures called micelles. And these micelles trap the chlorogenic acid inside them. Your body can't break open these micelles efficiently, which means the chlorogenic acid passes through your digestive system without being absorbed. You're essentially neutralizing one of the most powerful health compounds in your morning coffee by adding cream to it. This doesn't mean you should never add dairy to your coffee. But if you're drinking coffee specifically for its health benefits, and there are many, drinking it black maximizes those benefits dramatically. I had a patient, Margaret, 67 years old, who came to me with persistently high inflammatory markers despite a seemingly healthy diet. When I went through her daily routine in detail, I discovered she was drinking 4 cups of coffee a day, each with heavy cream. She was also eating low-fat flavored yogurt every morning. I made 2 simple changes. Switch to black coffee, switch to plain whole-fat Greek yogurt. 8 weeks later, her inflammatory markers had dropped by nearly 40%. Her gut symptoms, the bloating and discomfort she'd been attributing to aging, had almost completely resolved. 2 changes, that's all it took. So let me bring this all together for you. Here is your breakfast blueprint, backed by decades of research and hundreds of clinical studies. First, extend your overnight fast to at least 12 hours. Stop eating by 7 or 8 p.m. and don't eat again until 7 or 8 a.m. This activates your body's fat-burning metabolism and stem cell renewal. Second, when you do eat, make steel-cut or rolled oats your foundation. Prepare them overnight for maximum bioactive preservation. Add fresh berries for additional polyphenols. Third, eat eggs without guilt. 1 egg per day, preferably pasture-raised, will protect your vision, provide essential nutrients, and will not raise your cholesterol. That 1970s myth is dead. Fourth, eliminate or dramatically reduce bacon and all processed meats. The science is unambiguous. They are classified carcinogens. If you do eat bacon occasionally, cook it lighter. Use olive oil, and pair it with antioxidant-rich vegetables. Fifth, choose whole-fat, plain Greek yogurt over any low-fat, flavored, or sweetened variety. Read the labels. Avoid emulsifiers. Your gut microbiome will thank you. Sixth, consider drinking your coffee black. If you want dairy, save it for your yogurt or a glass of milk, where it provides its own distinct benefits without blocking the antioxidants in your coffee. These are not complicated changes. They don't require expensive supplements. They don't require a complete overhaul of your lifestyle. They require knowledge, which you now have, and the willingness to make small, informed choices every morning. And those small choices, repeated daily, will compound into extraordinary health outcomes over years and decades. Your breakfast is medicine. Treat it that way. Start tomorrow, make one change, just one, and tell me in the comments which change you're going to make first, because I guarantee you the person sitting next to you at the breakfast table needs to hear this too. Share this with them. And if you want to learn which 5 common dinner foods are silently destroying your health defense systems, you won't want to miss my next video. I'll see you there.